Some legends are born in fire and blood, their stories shouted in headlines. Others are born in the quiet moments between worlds, in the anonymous hum of an airplane cabin, in the polite exchange between strangers. They are born in a tear in the fabric of the ordinary. This is a ghost story told at 30,000 feet. A story not of the dead, but of the disappeared. It is the story of a man who walked out of the everyday world and into American myth, leaving behind only a name that wasn't his, and a mystery that would never die. The day before Thanksgiving. A day of transit, of unremarkable journeys home. It was from this sea of commuter anonymity that he emerged. He purchased a one-way ticket for Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305, a short 30-minute hop to Seattle, Washington. His ticket read simply, Dan Cooper. He was a man in his mid-40s, dressed in a dark business suit, a neat black tie, and a clean white shirt. Unassuming, professional. He was, by all accounts, just another passenger. Shortly after takeoff, as the plane climbed into the rainy afternoon sky, Cooper did what any businessman of the era might. He lit a Raleigh cigarette and ordered a bourbon and soda. He was quiet, polite, entirely unremarkable. Then, as the stewardess Florence Schaffner passed his seat in row 18, he motioned her over. He handed her a folded piece of paper. An air hostess in 1971 would expect any number of things on such a note. A phone number, a dinner invitation. Schaffner, assuming just that, slipped the note, unread, into her purse. Cooper, still calm, leaned closer. "Miss," he said quietly, "you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." Florence opened the note. The words, written in neat, all-capital letters with a felt-tip pen, were clear and terrifyingly direct. It was a demand and a threat. She asked to see the bomb. Cooper, without any hint of aggression, opened his briefcase just enough for her to see what lay inside. It was not the chaotic jumble of a madman. It was an arrangement of frightening precision. 8 red sticks, wired together, connected to a large cylindrical battery. It was real. Her training took over. She informed the flight's captain, William Scott, of the situation. Captain Scott immediately contacted air traffic control, relaying the hijacker's demands, which Cooper had dictated to Schaffner. They were not the ravings of a fanatic. They were the cold, calculated requests of a man who seemed to know exactly what he was doing. $200,000 in unmarked $20 bills. 4 parachutes. 2 primary, 2 reserve. A fuel truck ready in Seattle to refuel the aircraft upon arrival. No police presence on the tarmac. The specificity of the demands sent a chill through the authorities on the ground. $200,000 was a fortune, but it was the request for 4 parachutes that was a stroke of tactical genius. It introduced an element of the unknown. Was he planning on taking a hostage with him? Did he have an accomplice on board? It was a move designed to keep the FBI off balance, to prevent them from simply providing him with sabotaged equipment. This was not a man who was planning on being caught. In the air, the tension was a quiet poison. The other 35 passengers on board remained entirely unaware of the drama unfolding around them. For the next 2 hours, Flight 305 circled Puget Sound, a ghost ship held in a terrifyingly polite limbo, while on the ground, law enforcement and the airline scrambled to assemble Cooper's ransom. They photographed every single one of the $10,000 $20 bills. A desperate attempt to create a breadcrumb trail to a man who seemed intent on leaving none. Just after 5:30 p.m., the aircraft landed. The jet was directed to a remote, brightly lit section of the tarmac, far from the main terminals, a lonely stage for the coming exchange. Cooper, a silhouette against the window, had every emergency shade on the plane lowered, plunging the cabin into an artificial twilight. He was now in complete control, the unseen director of a terrifying piece of theater. The passengers were told there was a minor mechanical issue. They had no idea they were hostages in the middle of the most audacious skyjacking in American history. The exchange was about to be made. Cooper, the quiet man in the business suit, had successfully held a nation hostage. But his plan was only half finished. Getting the money was the simple part. The true genius of his crime, and its most enduring mystery, was still to come. It was in how he planned to disappear. Join us for part 2 of Voices of Innocent, The Leap into the Void. On the lonely tarmac of the Seattle-Tacoma Airport, Flight 305 was an island of controlled chaos, adrift in a sea of law enforcement it could not see. Inside, Dan Cooper was now in possession of $10,020 bills and 4 parachutes. The first act of his incredible aerial heist was complete. The passengers, finally told the truth of their 2-hour ordeal, were released, stumbling out into the rainy night, their faces a mixture of relief and disbelief. They left behind a skeleton crew: the captain, the first officer, a flight engineer, and a single stewardess, Tina Mucklow, who had volunteered to stay. They were now the sole witnesses to the second, and most impossible, act. For the next 2 hours, Cooper held his small crew in a state of polite captivity. He was, by all accounts, a gentleman. He insisted the crew be fed, even attempting to pay for their meals. He never raised his voice, never betrayed any sign of panic or agitation. He was a man in complete, unnerving control of his own narrative. His instructions for the second leg of the flight were, like his initial demands, astoundingly specific. Fly towards Mexico City. Altitude, 10,000 feet, dangerously low. Airspeed, 100 knots, just above stall speed. Landing gear, down. Wing flaps, lowered to 15 degrees. Cabin, unpressurized. To the pilots in the cockpit, this was a flight plan for a ghost. It was the absolute slowest, lowest, and most precarious configuration a Boeing 727 could possibly fly without simply falling out of the sky. Cooper wasn't just directing them. He was demonstrating an intimate, almost expert-level knowledge of the aircraft's capabilities. He was turning a commercial airliner into the slowest, most stable getaway car in the world. He had also demanded that the rear air stairs of the 727A, unique feature of the aircraft that opened from the tail, remain unlocked and capable of being lowered in mid-flight. At approximately 7:40 p.m., Flight 305 was once again in the air, a lone, lumbering shadow disappearing into a storm-ravaged sky. Cooper had made one final request. The cockpit crew was to remain inside the cockpit with the door sealed. The lone stewardess, Tina Mucklow, was his only companion. As the aircraft leveled out over the dark, rugged wilderness south of Seattle, Cooper began his final preparations. Calmly, methodically, he began to tie the heavy bag of money around his waist. He worked in the dim light, his movements precise and unhurried. Tina Mucklow, watching in a state of quiet terror, asked him if there was anything she could get for him. Cooper's reply was disarmingly kind. "No, dear," he said. "You had better go up to the cockpit and stay there." He insisted she show him how to open the heavy air stair door, then instructed her to seal herself in the cockpit and not to come out. It was a final, almost considerate, act of dismissal. From this moment on, no one knows exactly what happened. The pilots and the stewardess, now sealed in the cockpit, could only wait. At 8 p.m., a warning light flashed in the cockpit, indicating that the aft air stair, the ramp at the back of the plane, had been opened. The cabin pressure fluctuated. At approximately 8:13 p.m., somewhere over the dense, storm-blasted forests of southwestern Washington, the crew felt a sudden upward movement in the tail of the aircraft. A subtle, but distinct, shift in weight. This was the leap into the void. At 10,000 feet, in the dead of a November night, in the heart of a raging storm, bang Cooper, the polite man in the business suit, jumped out of a commercial airliner and into American legend. He fell out of the sky and vanished from the face of the earth. What followed was one of the most extensive and expensive manhunts in the history of the United States. The FBI, along with more than 1,000 Army troops, National Guardsmen, and local police, descended upon the area where they believed Cooper had landed. They scoured the landscape, inch by inch, a painstaking grid search of one of the most hostile terrains in North America. They were hunting for a man, for a parachute, for a bag containing 10,000 $20 bills. They found nothing, not a single trace, not a footprint, not a shred of a parachute, not a single one of the photographed $20 bills. It was as if Cooper had been a phantom all along, a man who had never truly existed. The most intensive search in a generation had come up completely empty. The authorities, the public, the world were left with only one conclusion. Their quarry, the audacious ghost of Flight 305, had died in his impossible leap. For nearly a decade, the case grew cold, the legend solidified. D.B. Cooper became a folk hero, a symbol of rebellion against the system, the man who had pulled off the perfect crime and paid for it with his life. The file was all but closed. And then a little boy, digging in the sand on a riverbank, found something that would change everything. Something that would prove that the ghost of D.B. Cooper had, for a time at least, made it back to Earth. Join us for Part 3 of Voices of Innocent, The Money on the Riverbank. A secret can only remain buried for so long. Time, the patient thief that steals memories, will sometimes, in a moment of sheer chance, unearth them. For nearly 9 years, the legend of D.B. Cooper was a story suspended in the black, rainy sky of 1971, a tale of a man who had leaped into oblivion, his body and his treasure presumed lost forever to the unforgiving wilderness of the Pacific Northwest. The case file had grown thick with theories, but thin on evidence. Then, on a quiet Sunday afternoon in February of 1980, an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram, on a family picnic, found something that didn't belong. As he smoothed out a patch of sand, his fingers brushed against a collection of rotting, waterlogged paper. He pulled it from the earth. It was a stack of $20 bills, bound together with a rubber band, so decayed they had almost fused into a single fragile brick. The Ingram family, recognizing the potential significance of their find, immediately turned it over to the FBI. At the crime lab, technicians painstakingly separated the fragile bills. They found 3 packets. 2 contained $120 bills each. A third contained only 90. In total, $5,800. The discovery was remarkable in itself, but it was the serial numbers that transformed a lucky find into a national sensation. The serial numbers were a perfect match. 9 years after it had fallen from the sky, a piece of the Cooper ransom had finally surfaced. It was the first, last, and only piece of hard, physical evidence from the crime ever recovered in the wild. The discovery sent a jolt of electricity through the dormant investigation. The ghost of D.B. Cooper was no longer just a legend. He had left a tangible mark on the world. And that mark created more questions than it answered. The location of the discovery was a complete paradox. Tenna Bar was miles downstream from the flight path and outside the primary search zone established in 1971. How did the money get there? Did Cooper survive the jump and bury it, intending to return later? Or was this all that was left after his body had disintegrated in the wild, the money washing down tributaries for years before finally coming to rest? The find triggered one of the most meticulous forensic examinations in FBI history. Geologists studied sediment layers. Hydrologists built complex models of the river's flow patterns, trying to determine if the money could have floated there naturally. Their conclusion was a frustrating maybe. It was possible, but not probable. Another theory emerged, that the money had been dredged from the riverbed and deposited on the bar by a dredging machine months before Ingram found it. The evidence, once again, refused to give a clean answer. It hinted at a story, but would not tell the tale. With the case officially reopened, the FBI turned its attention back to the handful of clues Cooper had left behind on the aircraft itself. The most promising was the simple black clip-on tie. For decades, it offered nothing. But with the advent of modern forensic science, the tie became a microscopic treasure trove. In the early 2000s, a team of citizen scientists was given access to the tie. What they found was a history of a man's life, told in particles of dust. Pure, unalloyed titanium particles. Rare earth elements, cerium and strontium sulfide. Traces of aluminum and bismuth. These were not the elements of a typical businessman's life. This specific cocktail of rare metals pointed to a highly specialized industry. In the 1970s, there was one place where this exact combination was a daily fact of life. Boeing's own advanced research and development division, the kind of high-tech facility that worked on supersonic transport and other classified aerospace projects. The analysis was a bombshell. It suggested that Dan Cooper was not an outsider. He was, in all likelihood, an engineer or a manager at Boeing itself, or a subcontractor with intimate access. He was a man who knew the planes because he helped build them. This new evidence revitalized the search, focusing it on a new class of suspect. Not just paratroopers or disgruntled veterans, but brilliant, perhaps discontented engineers. Men like Sheridan Peterson, a Boeing engineer, World War II veteran, and experienced smoke jumper. Or Vince Peterson, another Boeing engineer who, after the hijacking, went to his supervisors with a theory of how the 727A's air stair could be opened in flight, a theory he seemed to understand a little too well. The list of persons of interest was now in the dozens, a rogues gallery of men who fit the profile, but against whom no definitive evidence could ever be found. The discovery of the money was a flash of light in a decade of darkness. It proved that Cooper's story hadn't ended in the initial jump. It had, for some time, continued on the ground. But it was a fleeting glimpse. After 1980, no more money was ever found. No other clues ever surfaced in the wild. The trail, which had been so electrifyingly reignited by a boy digging in the sand, went cold once more. The ghost of D.B. Cooper had offered one final cryptic clue and then retreated back into the silence of the American wilderness. Join us for the final part of Voices of Innocent, a legend in the wind. Every great story must have an ending, but what if it doesn't? What happens when the trail runs cold not for a year or a decade, but for a lifetime? For the FBI, the case of D.B. Cooper became the longest, most exhaustive, and ultimately most frustrating investigation in its history. A sprawling 51-year hunt for a man who seemed to have weaponized anonymity itself. While the official investigation stalled, the legend of D.B. Cooper exploded into the American consciousness. He became something more than a criminal. He became a modern folk hero. In an era of disillusionment, of the Vietnam War and Watergate, his story resonated with a rebellious spirit. He was the quiet man who took on the system and won. Songs were written, festivals were held, and a tavern in Ariel, Washington, near the suspected drop zone, became a kind of secular shrine. The public didn't just want the mystery solved. They wanted to believe the man had gotten away with it. But a mystery, no matter how mythic, cannot remain open forever. In July of 2016, nearly 45 years after the jump, the FBI made a stunning announcement. They were officially closing the active investigation into the D.B. Cooper skyjacking. After half a century, after investigating over 1,000 credible suspects, after spending untold millions in resources, they had reached a final, immutable dead end. Their official position remained that Cooper had not survived the jump. They pointed to the brutal conditions: a freezing 15-degree wind chill at 10,000 feet, a 200-mile-per-hour windstorm, and a landing in treacherous mountainous wilderness in nothing but a business suit and loafers. Surviving the fall was one thing. Surviving the night would have been another miracle entirely. For the Bureau, the story of D.B. Cooper ended as it began, in the cold, dark, and indifferent void between the clouds and the earth. And so, we are left with the final haunting questions of identity. Not just who was he, but what does he represent? If he died, he is a symbol of audacious failure, a man whose brilliant plan was ultimately defeated by the raw power of nature. His bones lie undiscovered, scattered somewhere in the vast, green cathedrals of the Pacific Northwest. He is a modern-day Icarus who flew too close to the sun, his prize money a rotting testament to his fatal hubris. But if he survived, then he is something else entirely. He is a phantom of success, a testament to the idea that a single person with enough planning, nerve, and intelligence can execute a perfect crime and simply walk away. In this version, he is the man who fell out of the sky and landed on his feet. He recovered his money, forged a new identity, and lived out his days in quiet, anonymous comfort, reading the stories of his own legend with a wry, knowing smile. He is not just a ghost. He is a ghost who is free. In the end, the most powerful clue he left behind was his own absence. D.B. Cooper, a name he never claimed, for a man no one can identify. He represents a tear in the official record of the world, a mystery so perfect it feels like fiction. His crime was not simply the theft of $200,000. His true crime was the theft of his own identity. He erased himself, and in doing so, he became immortal. A legend carried forever on the wind. The identity of D.B. Cooper may never be known. You think he survived the jump? And if so, who do you believe he was? Share your opinion in the comments below, join our community, and subscribe to Voices of Innocent. See you soon with another true storytelling journey.